Welcome to the On Wonder Podcast. This series, we're talking about early intervention, and today we have an early intervention SLP, speech language pathologist, Bridget Malpocker, who works for the University of Washington's EEU, or Experimental Education Unit. And Bridget, I will let you introduce yourself a little bit more and tell us about the EEU, but thank you so much for joining us today.
Yeah, thanks for having me. So I work for the Experimental Education Unit, which is part of the Herring Center for Inclusive Education. And the Herring Center is part of University of Washington's College of Education at their Seattle campus. And within the EU, we offer a comprehensive early childhood school community. So we offer services for children with disabilities, inclusive education for children with disabilities and without disabilities as well. And so we have a program for early support where we serve birth to 3 years old. And then there's also a preschool program and a kindergarten program as well. And I've been at the EEU since 2019. So I had 6 months of normalcy before the COVID pandemic happened. And then prior to that, I worked at another birth to 3 agency here in Seattle called Boyer Children's Clinic. And I've been working in early support since 2017. So almost 8 years this summer.
All right. Well, so I came right before you with my son. So I was an SLP before that, but my son had early intervention services at Boyer is where he started.
Oh, really?
And at EEU. So just a few years before you must have been there. But I think he was 18 months at the EEU and we loved it. And they were so great and they had such great strategies, but it was so nice to have typically developing kids and kids with disabilities, the kids who were speaking and non-speaking. My son wasn't speaking at the time verbally, but they were introducing different types of assistive technology and AAC. Tell us a little bit about the population you work with, and do you have kids who are using AAC right now?
Yeah, so I would say that my current caseload is diverse. I've got a couple younger kids, like 10-month-old, and then I have a few kids that are almost 3. So it's a wide range, and everyone's at different points in their language development. I have a couple kids right now that I'm actually starting to talk to families about introducing some sort of AAC, whether that is kind of light tech. So like I actually brought a visual, like a core word board. And then also talking with some families about a high-tech version, so like a speech generating device. And just starting to have those conversations with families.
So what do those conversations look like?
Yeah, so what I usually do is I like to bring the different options to families' houses or wherever we're meeting that visit, because I have found that if I just try and talk about it, it's a little bit harder to kind of visualize and conceptualize, rather than if I actually have the item with me, it's a little bit easier to show and demonstrate how it can be used just in day-to-day life.
That makes a lot of sense.
And I usually like to start the conversation by just talking about it and how that this can be another tool that we can use to help their child communicate. So I feel strongly that, kids should have a variety of different ways to be able to tell us what they want to talk about. Because if you think about it, us as adults, we can talk to each other with spoken language. We can communicate with our facial expressions and our our
Yeah.
eye gaze and looking and
We're texting each other.
texting, calling, and so I want to be able to provide our tiniest of humans ways to communicate too. And so just kind of talking to families about how this can just be another tool in their kids' communication toolbox, and that if this is, it can help kind of decrease those frustrations that can occur when those spoken words are just not coming along as quick.
Right. I feel like I like the idea of saying it's just one of the tools. Oftentimes there's a big fear, or although unsubstantiated by research, that, well, then they'll never talk.
Yeah.
What's your response to that comment?
Yeah, I get that question a lot. And, I validate those fears because it is, if you're not in this profession, in this field, that's a very valid concern that like, oh, if I just focus on like these picture symbols or this speech generating device, my kid's not going to want to try and talk because they have this other way. And, I reassure that it's actually a bridge to spoken communication of like, right now, for whatever reason, those spoken words are just a little bit trickier. And having another way to show us and tell us what they want to play with, what they want to eat, what they see, what they're excited about, can just help, like I said, bridge that communication and really help decrease the frustration. And kind of reiterate that research shows that actually introducing some sort of AAC can actually increase spoken language output. And sometimes it takes, a few sessions to kind of chat through. And then it also really demonstrating and showing parents the use of AAC in their daily life. And then they can watch the reaction from their kid too, which I think helps.
Right. Right. That's true. Seeing it firsthand. Brenda and I talk about that a lot when we do consultations with school districts. And, a lot of times there's not time or there hasn't been time made for parents to come into the school to see what's happening. Sometimes we hear from parents who say, they've been using a device at school for a year and I don't know what it is, or I've never talked to the SLP, right? But that idea of showing like, look, so we'll say like, take a video to the team and show the family what's happening and how great it is. But I love that having your little guy there, little person there, and using it while you're there with the family, because ultimately in any early intervention, the family is doing the intervention, right? They are the big piece of this.
Yeah.
You mentioned, Bridget, you mentioned frustration twice. So I'm guessing that that's a big cue for families that their child might need an alternative or a supplement to an alternative way to communicate. Talk to me about the frustration piece.
Yeah. I think what I've seen just at home or being in the home environment or, daycare or wherever the family wants to meet. You can just see that sometimes when that spoken language piece is, taking a little bit longer to develop, there are times where you can really see the child trying to communicate something, whether it's a request or whether, their toy is stuck or, something's out of reach or they want more of their food or their drink or whatever it may be. And you can just see that they're trying to communicate, and it could be, with a gesture, with a vocalization, maybe pointing, maybe leading. And they are times where there's just that communication breakdown where parents are trying to figure out what it is, and they're kind of going through the list and guessing. And sometimes we guess correctly, and then the times that we don't, the kid rightly so gets upset because like, I'm trying to show you, I'm trying to tell you. So that's where, I talk to families about, this is a moment where, we're all trying to get the child's needs met, and we're trying to figure out, we're listening, we're watching what they're doing to communicate their message. And then sometimes having that extra layer of communication and picture symbol can really help both the child show us what they want, and then also help us as the adult and the communication partner see what they're trying to communicate, and then we can validate and provide them with what they're wanting, or what they want to show us, and we can comment back on it.
Because a lot of times the frustration is because they want to communicate something, right?
Exactly. Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I think that might be one of those early indicators to families that make them think, well, how else can I help them?
Exactly.
But we just interviewed a parent, and she was talking about in early intervention, these children are just extensions of their parents. I mean, they're so connected, right? I mean, and I always say, you speak Johnny, you speak, Susie. So because just like all of us as parents, prior to verbal speech, we've been speaking our child's language. We've been reading body language. It's our job to understand that's a cry that's I'm hungry. That's a cry that I'm tired. I mean, that's just something that's innate, right? We speak our child's language, right? We have no choices but that. And then as they get more words, then we get more details. But when those words aren't coming, the child's frustration is, I mean, I don't know what comes first, chicken or the egg, because then the parent's frustration is that I didn't guess right.
Yeah.
I feel like there's a lot of pressure on parents then to feel bad and to have their own like, I just wish I knew what you wanted. And so it excused the behavior. But again, if the behaviors, head banging, or things that are harmful, there's so much emotional distraught from parents at this age to go, I just wish I knew. I wish I was guessing right. And I think one thing about the devices, I say that, it's not your job to read their minds.
Yeah.
And once they get the device, it's their job to tell you more, not your job to guess harder.
Yeah.
When you see the result of infinite guessing in an older AAC user, I have people who are very capable of using their device, and with their parents, they still wait for the parents to guess right, and then they're just yes or no. And I never have that kind of exchange with them. So I feel like the other great thing about early intervention is not establishing it's my job to guess right. And just not even starting a cycle of guessing, but starting a cycle of I believe you have something to say. I believe I don't know what it is. That is communication, telling me something I don't know. You're worth the time. I'm going to wait for you to tell me something. I'm going to wait for me to give you clues, you to give me clues. So I feel like there's so much in early intervention that we can nip in the bud, and honestly, as far as the complicated dynamics of the responsibility on parents to understand their children that are not functionally verbal, and saying, no, let's share the load here. Let's have a common language, and let's not establish a 20 question scenario.
Yeah. I totally agree with all what you just said. And when I introduce AAC to parents, I really try and talk about let's focus first on building that connection. And, we're not trying to make your kid say something specific or make them tell us something specific, but let's actually just play and make comments on what you noticed your kid doing or what they seem interested in. And we can just build upon that, and we can, talk about what we see them doing, what we're doing with the toy, and then all we're doing is adding in that picture symbol, and it can just be, let's see, where's my look?
I love that you're doing.
Look, look at the car go down, and we're just building it in naturally and showing that communication can be fun. It's not just trying to figure out, going through the guessing game of like, do you want Cheerios? Do you want oranges? Do you want yogurt? Because that's exhausting for everyone.
Yes.
Right.
And so yeah.
For those who are listening, ever the SLP, Bridget's got her communication, her flip book, and this one looks like it's the Sawtello is at the core, and then it has the flip on top that you can print from.
Well, yeah, this is the I love a visual because sometimes my explanations I feel like are a little bit harder. But this is it's called the core word board. And up here is what we call fringe vocabulary. So vocabulary that doesn't that you don't use as often, like throughout the day, and you can make it you can customize it to be more specific to your family's daily routines, your kids' interests, but the core word board,
like nouns and things that are actually pretty important for a lot of our little guys, right?
Yeah, this is a 77 words, and it's kind of the most common words that come up in English, and it's color coded by personal pronouns. Green is verbs. Purple is question words. We've got prepositions and adjectives.
So you were pointing to the word look and saying it. And it takes the pressure off of families, right? You're just playing, you're only focusing on a couple words right there, right? But also as a family, you can print that, right? Or as getting started. I'm thinking of, well, there is a process to AAC and getting the right AAC, but something like that core board, you can go download it, print it, and just start using it like you're doing with some modeling.
And how are you introducing AAC to those with more complex bodies that aren't able to point to pictures?
Yeah, for that, usually, a motor therapist is on the team for those families. And so kind of taking input from either the physical therapist or the occupational therapist about motor abilities, fine motor, gross motor, and then also if there's any other maybe vision that we need to be aware of. But there are many different high-tech device options. So some kids, kind of that pointer finger isolation is a little bit trickier, but they can, do a full fist and kind of make selections like that. And so there are buttons,
right,
that you can use, so that for those children, you still are giving them opportunities to be able to communicate, and just taking into consideration those other needs that they have, and making sure that no matter, at the end of the day, we want to be able to give all kids the ability to communicate however they can,
right,
whatever way they want to. And so for those those children, it's just a little bit, there's just an extra layer of making sure that we're taking into consideration all of the motor aspects and making sure that we come up with a plan that works for the family as well too.
And I think that sometimes our kids with complex bodies don't get the early intervention. It'll be like, oh, they're not ready for that yet. Like sometimes that they're not ready for it yet has more to do with that the expertise of this professional isn't ready for that level of complexity. And so I think, yeah, you're right that it's like if you're working in early intervention and you're not sure about the access method, that's the team approach thing. It doesn't mean that early intervention still isn't when we get started.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think too, from working in birth to 3, sometimes these conversations, you have to have them multiple times because sometimes too the family isn't ready to try and incorporate something new. There's lots of different factors that we need to take into consideration, and just if a family is going to be doing a big move, it might not be the right time, or there's personal things happening in the family's lives, or family is really wanting to focus on feeding and making sure their child is getting the nourishment that they need, or maybe there's a surgery coming up. There's so many different life factors too. And so when I'm talking about AAC to families, I always try and take that into account as well. And so sometimes it's just starting to talk about it, but then letting them know that we can revisit this. I just want to show you that this can be another thing that we try. But if you're feeling like it's too much right now, that's okay. We can revisit this in a few months when you feel like life is more settled, or you feel good about, how feeding is going or what have you.
I love that you brought up the family perspective, because I think that's what this early intervention is all about, right? And if it doesn't work for the family, right, then it's probably not going to be working for that child.
Yeah.
And part of that is the therapist's relationship with the family, right? That builds over time, and you need to have that relationship. But also, I love that you kind of like leave those little breadcrumbs. Like, here are some things, I'll show you how it works. We might be trying it in preschool or whatever, but we'll continue to bring this up. And then also it feels for the families that they haven't missed an opportunity that never is going to come up again, or you're going to say, well, that only worked back then, right?
Yeah.
Bridget, I wanted to ask you about play, because that is a huge part of like preschool. And I know when my son was at the EEU, play is like the whole day, right? They do eat together. They sing songs, but it's all play themed. And I know that for a lot of our families and our kids with disabilities, play looks a little different. And sometimes play is a little hard to figure out um, how to do. And I know, like with my son, one of the things was some of the kids were riding bikes and he wanted to be involved, but being a little less verbal was harder, right? And so we came up with a plan that he was going to hold up a stop and go sign. And then he also was like, "Ooh, I'm kind of controlling what they're doing." And he was part of the play. But that seems like something that would just come like, "Oh, let's do this." But we actually had to sit down and look at what was happening and think about that together. So that's kind of when I first thought about play being more than just it's what kids naturally do, right? How do you encourage different types of play, and what does play look like at the EEU?
Yeah. Well, one of our big philosophies is, all play is okay. And I don't know who that quote comes from.
Love that.
But I love it because
Yes.
Play looks different for everyone. And also, like, if we think back to our own childhoods, my play interest was probably different than both of yours too. And that is fine. And I think working especially in early support, it has really reminded me that like if I try and control the environment too much and sometimes at all,
Mm-hmm.
the my little friend is not going to be interested in me, and they're just going to be like, this person is clearly not picking up what I want to do, and I'm just going to ignore and go away from them. And I think in early support, especially, um, another quote that I don't know who says it, but it's play is the work of children. And our little ones learn so much through play and through interacting with their environment. And the most buy-in I have ever had, throughout these 8 years is just um, watching what the kid is going towards and what they are doing with the toy or with the object, like a measuring cup, whatever, and then joining them. And, teaching parents that, if their kid is wanting to bang on their toy today, great. What we can do is we can just make comments, bang, 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 woohoo, again, just adding language on top of what they're doing, to not only show them that we think what they're doing is really cool, and keep the interaction going, but then we're just mapping words on top of it. And kids are more attuned to the language around them when it follows their interests and their excitement. And so that's why I love being in early support, is because I just get to play all day and it's fun, and just each kid, has their own unique interests, and it's just really fun to, especially if you are with a child for a longer period of time, it's really fun to see their little imaginations just kind of blossom.
Mm-hmm.
And as they get older, their play changes, and it's just really fun to enter in to their world and just go along and watch and listen to what they want to do and what they want to talk about.
Mm-hmm. You mentioned watching and listening a lot during this interview. A lot of observation skills go into working with students, right? And figuring out whether it's assistive technology or AAC or just interests,
Mhm.
what interests our students. And I think I'm really glad you brought that up, because I do think sometimes it's hard to step back and remind ourselves that I'm just going to watch for a bit and see what cues I pick up on, especially like for our students with alternative access needs, right? So how are they responding when this sound happens or this happens? Where are they looking? But for all of our students.
And I think that best laid plans with a toddler aren't going to work anyways.
Oh, yeah.
So it's like we might as well follow their lead, partly because, research says, right? And we know that intellectually. But I mean, if you didn't know that intellectually, then the minute you sat down with a plan with a 2-year-old, you would learn that just organically.
Yes.
That, yeah, if you're getting out measuring cups, they will not be used in any of its original purpose, because that's just not the way, that's not the lens that they have right now. And so I think the reason why observation skills are so critical is because we are adults and we have a lot of background knowledge on a lot of things, and we bring that to the table, and it creates structure and kind of a more adult way of looking at things. Whereas when you stop and go, I don't know what lens they're looking at this through, I'm going to watch how they're playing with that. Oh, they're using that as a pouring tool. They're using that as a hat.
Yeah.
I mean, and it can be the same toy. It can be a bowl, right? And so it's just like, I think recognizing the way that they are exploring something, that is the vocabulary you're modeling. not
Yes.
not bowl,
Yeah.
because wah wah, that's
Yeah.
boring. And you know what I mean? You're going to be dismissed by the
Mhm.
toddler.
Mhm.
So, and I liked the idea. I sometimes on devices I'll record speech too. So it's like, yay. So there's inflection and things like that because you modeled that too. You were like, yay, bang, bang, bang. Sometimes the device, bang, 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 bang is
Yeah.
not
It's not as
exciting,
exciting.
right? And I'm not replacing my excited voice with the device, but they're coinciding, right? And so it's like thinking about how to make each play experience authentic, and then they feel seen and heard because you're seeing
Mhm.
something through their eyes.
Yeah. Yeah. And I encourage families to um when they are kind of following their child's lead in play and they're commenting on what they're doing. Um, Another layer is kind of watch for their child's response to see if we are on the right track of like, yes, this is what I was doing. Thank you for noticing. This has been so fun. Let's keep it going. And those responses from our little ones can be, a smile. It can be, they do a quick look back at you. It
Mhm.
could be they continue doing whatever action they were doing with the toy. And
Mhm.
all of that helps us as the adult realize, okay, yeah, this is what they are excited about, what they want to do, and the language is matching that.
Mhm.
And in the same breath, we can watch to see if we are on the completely wrong track. And I feel like that can be a little bit easier to watch and look for because
Yeah.
kids will, push things away or, get mad and make a face. And those opportunities are great too, because then we can model, oh, no, stop. I did not like that. Um,
And you're saying no, stop, as in the I think this child is you're telling me that you want to stop this. I
yeah,
can see that you want to move on to something else,
mm,
not stop that behavior, right?
exactly,
Yeah.
exactly. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
You have a success story that you could share with us?
Doesn't have to be like, oh, this worked perfectly either. It could just be
Okay.
No, because I feel like when they throw the fit, you learn more. So I'm not
Oh,
even,
yes.
again, I say that because it's like, how are we defining success in even that way, right?
Yeah, I think one little friend that comes to mind, this little one, um, like understanding receptive language, understood like everything that we were saying, followed directions, you know, said, go get this item, they'd be able to go get it. So, but just for whatever reason, that expressive language, being able to um, get the words out was a little bit more tricky. And so we introduced uh, some lighter, I introduced the 4 word board. And there was one day I actually visited this friend at daycare, and we it was during like free play, and uh, this little friend really wanted to play with the blocks. And we're like, okay, great, let's bring the blocks down. And we were just building towers, and I was modeling, you know, up and down and uh-oh. And all of a sudden, and I wasn't expecting anything. I was just modeling both the spoken words and then um
You
uh,
weren't telling him to push this button or say uh-oh or
exactly. Yeah, I
point to this.
never ever take a kid's hand and force them
Mm-hmm.
Mhm.
to do anything because I really don't know what a child is trying to say.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
I can only take my best guess and model language and then watch it to see those cues like I talked about of like, am I on the right track or not?
Mm-hmm.
So I was just modeling language both on the board and spoken, and all of a sudden, um, he started copying me, both verbally and pointing to the words. And it was just like this light bulb moment went off, and it was just so fun. And we just kept doing it over and over again. And it was kind of like from that point, kind of the next several sessions, just that kind of back and forth attempt at copying really started to take off. And it was just really fun. I can't think of another. It's just
Yes, you have this moment where, like you're saying, the light bulb moment. Where they realize I touch it, I get it, or they realize I touch it, I say it, and you keep going, or I mean, whatever the communicative intent was behind it, they realized they had power over that and over the environment, and it's so beautiful.
Do you think part of that was also because you weren't forcing them to do what you wanted? You were following their lead?
I think so. Anytime that I have introduced any sort of AAC, whether it's light tech or high tech, the most success I ever have is when we're not forcing anything on the child. I had another little friend who's autistic, and we introduced high tech AAC, and several of the beginning sessions were just me and mom modeling language on it and showing that this can be another tool. You don't have to use it. We're not forcing you. I'm not bringing it in front of your face and making you point to the buttons. We're just going to be using it and playing with you and interacting that way. And sure enough, he started coming over to the device himself, and he really liked the family page. And so we updated it to include real photos of family members, and he would navigate to that page all on his own and would just want to talk about his family. And so just pressing each, sibling and extended family members picture. And, then I encouraged mom to follow his lead. And if he pressed, older siblings' face, you can say, oh yeah, they're at school. We're going to see them when they come home. I love playing with so-and-so. And that was just another kind of really fun moment of like, we're building that connection, and like, you're wanting to talk about your family right now, and we're going to talk about your family, and we're just going to build in those other pieces of, bringing in a context too.
Right. The other thing I love about that example is you're not delivering. Brother's at school. So you're not hiding him because you can't deliver brother at that moment, right?
Yeah.
So you're responding, not delivering. And I think that's important in all AAC, but especially at that early intervention stage. I know I take the song Bingo, and I'm like, there is someone that we all love. Who do we love? Right. And whoever he picks and mommy is her name or whatever. And that way I'm responding every time, and they get to where they are waiting for you to say the next part of the song. And then it's their turn to touch the part. And you're doing some beautiful turn taking about their favorite topic. They're the ones that navigated to the people page to begin with. Right. And it's like I not having the pressure to deliver the person, but acknowledging, are you missing daddy right now? I wonder if you want to know, where is he? Yeah. I wonder, and you start to kind of talk about, you want to talk about your people right now. And I can do that. I can do that with you. And so I love that example because it reminds us that we don't necessarily have to cause and effect deliver. We just have to respond.
Exactly. Bridget, I'm curious about how you build in the AAC or any AT to either the early childhood goals, their early learning goals, or throughout their day if you're working with families at home, or I guess both, they would go hand in hand, right? Do you have any suggestions about that?
Yeah, so what I tend to do is, after having discussions with families, I usually say, there are a couple different ways that we can go about trying this. And either we can choose like one word to focus on, and that's going to be the word for the week. And we're going to just practice modeling, let's say, more, during the day. And that's the only one that, you're going to model both spoken and then by pressing the button or pointing to the picture symbol. And it can be, during mealtime and, they're looking like they want more food. So that's when we model more. You want more cheese, and then you give them more cheese. Or, they're playing with a toy and they want more puzzles or more cars. So that's one approach that I talk to families about. And I always say, if you feel like you're getting really comfortable with more and you want to start modeling other words, go for it. And for some families that works really, really well, of just like, I just want to get used to modeling during the day. And it can be visually overwhelming, like seeing all of these options of words. So sometimes just having one to focus on, I feel like I've gotten good buy-in that way. And another approach that I talk to families about is picking like one time during the day to try and use the device with your child. Because, days are busy, and sometimes having or feeling like you have to do it all day long can be, again, overwhelming. And if parents feel overwhelmed or like it's one extra thing, I found that it's not going to be used. And so encouraging families to pick like an easy time of the day where you're feeling good, you're feeling calm, your kid is usually in a happy state, and just, starting with 5 minutes or even 2 minutes of just having the device out and showing the kid that this can be a tool that they can use during this time, and then building from there. I've found that kind of presenting it those two ways, like I said, get more buy-in, and families actually feel like it's attainable. And so I always like to start small and then encourage families. If you feel great about it, go wild. Like, and we kind of work from there.
I think that's a great thing to think about, because I can't remember the research now, but somebody was talking about how the research is that paraeducators in classrooms are feeling overwhelmed by AAC when the SLP says, just model everything you're saying. And it's too much. It's too much. I think it was Aaron Sheldon in that with a class at Closing the Gap, but actually, if we lose the adults before we even get going, I mean, if we burn them out at the early intervention stage, that is a disservice to the rest of the providers moving forward. So I understand saying, let's make this attainable. Let's make you successful at some baby steps here, quite literally. They're taking baby steps, parents are taking baby steps. And so that we don't, I think we can get overzealous in, oh, these are the core words and we're going to learn 50 in a minute. And I think you can burn them out on the expectations of I have other children and I have a job and I have stuff, right? And all of that's valid. And so I like the idea of don't be like breaking down a task for small. And once they get comfortable, they'll take off. They're not going to stick with the one word you suggested this week once they get going. right? They're not going to stick to the 5-minute timer once you get going, but whatever you have to break it down to where it feels attainable. And that's observing the parents.
Mhm.
Speaking of baby steps, you mentioned working with a baby, a 10-month-old, and I'm just curious because I think a lot of parents, and I probably would have been the same way, even as an SLP, might not realize that their child would need speech therapy services that young.
Yeah, for the little ones, like itty bitty babies, again, I tell parents, get on their baby's level and just kind of play and interact with them. Babies love singing, and you don't have to be a good singer. You don't even have to sing a real song. You can make things up. But just kind of that, with that early stage, it's all about kind of that social communication of, I'm joining you in your world. We're just going to interact together, maybe read some books. If you make a noise, I'm going to copy you and start kind of that back and forth of like, you're doing something and I'm responding to you. Like, I want to hear what you have to say.
Mhm.
And so for those little babies, that's kind of where I start of like, again, kind of just follow their lead, see what they're
Mhm.
interested in, and just talk and copy them, make silly noises. Um,
And as a parent, how would you know that you might even need services that young? Your child might need services that young?
yeah. So usually if it's a baby under 12 months, usually parents come in because they have more motor concerns for their baby. Maybe their pediatrician recommended a evaluation, or parents can also self-refer of. So sometimes we get parents who say, my 10-month-old isn't sitting up, and I notice other 10-month-olds are doing X, Y, and Z. And
Mhm.
so they're wondering, does my baby need a little extra support? Um, or, if a baby is born early, and if they had any NICU time, that's an automatic referral to early support services to really support the family once they're out of the hospital and just continue to keep track of our preemies and making sure, they're continuing to grow and develop on their timeline. Um, so yeah, usually that's how parents kind of start. And with early support, it's a initial evaluation, which we go over all the developmental areas. So we look at social, emotional, adaptive, which is kind of those life skills like dressing, undressing, feeding, um, uh, hand washing, those kind of things. Fine motor, so how they're using their hands. Gross motor, how they're using their big body movements. And then communication, where we look at the receptive language, which is how kids are understanding us. And then expressive language, how they're communicating. So with those little babies, we still look at all 5 areas, and sometimes just based on their age, they actually do also have a qualifying score in communication. And so then parents can, at the individualized family service plan meeting, which is the meeting where we meet as a team and talk with families about their priorities, their concerns, what they want to work on.
The IEP for little guys is kind of it, right? If you're used to hearing about an
Yes.
IEP for older children, it's yeah, the IFSP.
Yeah.
Hmm.
And so at that time, that's when parents, if they want also speech services, they can request that too. But some families want to just focus on the motor with their little babies. But then once they're in the system, if they have, as their baby gets older, and then we see more of those communication milestones start to emerge more. If families have questions, they can always talk to us. And then if they want to add services, we have that conversation.
So you've talked about you've talked about a lot of strategies for working with young children and a few like examples of your core board, Flipboard, and then resources like with the EEU and Boyer in Washington State, early services. Are there any other resources that families should look for when they're starting this journey and they think they need some supports? Any resources you commonly give families?
If families are on social media, there are some speech language pathologists that I recommend. I really like Carrie Ebert. She is a early support SLP, and she also has a teenage son who's autistic. So she's got both lenses of working with the itty bitties, and then also from the parent perspective with a young adult son who has autism. So I really like her. I also really like PlaySpark. They're one of them is a speech language pathologist. The other one is an occupational therapist. And they really promote inclusive practices and neurodiversity affirming language. And both those two that I mentioned have really taught me too to challenge some of these preconceived notions that like I had when I was just starting out, because this is a brand new, there's so much in the world of speech language pathology, and it's hard to, you come out of grad school thinking certain things and you actually get into practice and you're
always learning.
You're always learning. You're never stopping learning. Yeah, they've just been, I really like those
Great.
two. So, yeah.
Yeah, it's great to have resources. It's always great to have things to check out. And the beauty of social media is that you can do it when you're available, right?
Yeah.
You have a minute, you can check out what they have to say. So thank you for those resources. Thank you for all of your examples and your stories. Thinking about being child-led and starting small with families and following your family's leads too.
And just thank you for your work in it. I think as families reflect back later in life, they do look back at early interventionists and say, they changed my trajectory. They don't always see all that before they leave you at 3, right? And so I think that early intervention really does change trajectory. So I really appreciate the work you're doing there.
Thank you.
The contents of this podcast were developed under contract with the Washington Office of the Superintendent of Public Instruction, U.S. Department of Education, and administered by Central Washington University. However, those contents did not necessarily represent the policy of the OSPI and CWU, and you should not assume endorsement by the federal and state government.